They laughed when I walked out. They didn't know I was walking away with everything. My name is Denise. I'm 44 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. I should tell you something before I go any further. Something I never would have admitted about myself a few years ago. I have always been the quiet one. The one who listened more than she spoke. The one who learned to survive by reading expressions, tracking the temperature of a room, sensing moments before they fully formed. They thought that made me harmless. They thought silence meant softness. They never understood that in silence you can measure the true weight of a person. It started in the basement. Not the kind of polished floors and workout equipment, but the old kind that kind houses keep like a secret. Concrete that stayed cold even in July, rusted shelving lined with paint cans no one remembered buying. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling, flickering like it was deciding whether to keep living or finally burn out. Shadows collected in corners, thick as cobwebs. It felt like stepping into something half forgotten. A life paused in dust and time. I was kneeling by the furnace, sorting through a box of old tax files Mom had shoved down there years ago. My knees pressed into the cold floor until it felt like the chill was climbing into my bones. Papers slid against each other, the sound dry and brittle like old leaves. My fingers brushed staples, faded ink, handwritten notes, and Mom's looping script. I studied each page the way I used to study her face when she was tired, looking for signs, clues, a story behind the one she told. Upstairs, laughter rose and fell through the floorboards. Muffled, scattered, but loud enough to remind me that while I was breathing dust, they were sipping wine. Jason was entertaining the cousins, of course he was. He always loved a performance. Clinking glasses. The high squeal of our aunt's voice as she competed to be the center of attention. They had all come for the estate meeting, but most of them were here for the wine, the gossip, and the chance to pretend we were still a family that liked each other. Me. I wasn't ready to toast yet. I wasn't even ready to pretend. The air smelled like dust and heating oil, heavy at the back of my throat. I pulled out another manila folder. Receipts from 2007, nothing useful. I was ready to move on when my fingertips hit something different, something harder. Pushed behind the shelving as if someone wanted it forgotten. A black fireproof LOCKBOX. No label. Heavy. The kind of heavy that isn't just about metal. The kind of heavy that suggests secrets. I tugged it out, coughing as a cloud of dust rose with it. The latch wasn't locked, just stiff, like it didn't want to give. When it finally did, a soft metallic click echoed in the basement. Inside, documents were stacked neatly, held together by a rubber band, pristine compared to everything around them. Too pristine. Too cared for. Someone had taken these out often. Someone had looked through them. Someone had plans. The first page on top was a bank statement. First Ridge Bank, Louisville. I hadn't lived within 2 states of Louisville in my adult life. Mom never mentioned it. She always used First County Credit Union, the same branch she dragged me to when I opened my first account at 16. The paper felt new in a place that smelled like 1982. The date was from 3 years ago, but the name on the account. Jason Mitchell. Not both of us. Just him. My brother. The one who told everyone we were handling things as a team. The one who clapped me on the shoulder yesterday and said, "You know, I just want what's fair. Fair. My thumb slid over his name, printed in bold. Unbothered ink, as if it had never known struggle or shame or the taste of lies. Then my eyes dropped to the balance, $42,317.85. Bank account with a transfer on death designation. Transfer on death meant it passed directly to him when Mom died. No probate. No estate division. No discussion. I blinked hard once, twice. Maybe I was misreading it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe grief was twisting numbers into shapes they weren't, but I knew what I saw. Mom never mentioned this. Not once. And she told us everything, repeatedly. From the day we turned 18. She said it every time finances came up. I don't believe in favoring one child. You both get equal. She said it like a vow. She said it like a promise she carved into the future with her own hands. Another page. Same account, different month. Small deposits. Mostly cash, regular, patterned, hidden. My fingers trembled, a small, involuntary quake I tried to swallow. The third page showed a withdrawal, $6,000, 2 months before. Mom passed, $6,000 in cash. I remembered that month. Jason drove her to the hospital. I was working double shifts, trying to keep my job steady while still bringing meals and sitting by her bed on weekends. Jason had said he was paying out of pocket. Medicare doesn't cover everything, he said, running a hand through his hair like he was burdened by generosity. Let me handle it. You can pay me back when we settle the estate. I sat there, staring at the page until I couldn't feel my legs. The cold seeped into my spine, rising slowly, an icy thread weaving itself into me like it wanted to stay. I stood carefully, holding the lockbox tight against my chest. Upstairs, someone laughed, Jason's voice, loud and relaxed. The sound of someone who believed he was safe. He probably opened the wine I bought. The Bordeaux I saved for holidays. The one I planned to toast with when we signed the papers and honored Mom's wishes. I closed the lockbox, fastened the latch, and set it beside the furnace. My breath came slow, measured, as if something inside me clicked into place. This wasn't about money. It was about what he thought I wouldn't find. What he assumed I wasn't smart enough to understand, strong enough to confront, or cold enough to use. It was about how easily he smiled at me upstairs, knowing this was buried below my feet. I looked down at the concrete and remembered every time. Jason had told me I was too emotional to handle finances. Let me deal with it, Denise. You're too soft for this kind of stuff. Soft. The word scraped across memory like a blade. I picked up the box. Each step up the stairs felt like walking out of a version of myself I no longer needed to be. When I opened the basement door, the living room lights rushed toward me, warm and bright. As if I had re-entered a world that didn't know what had shifted. Jason stood by the fireplace, retelling some story from his college days, stretching moments into legends, making himself sound like someone the world never truly understood. Everyone laughed. He didn't even look at me. I didn't say a word. I walked past them all, into the guest room, closed the door, locked it. My hands no longer shook. They studied. They planned, and in that quiet room, sat in that quiet room, with a lockbox full of truth sitting beside me. I realized something I had never let myself consider. They thought I was walking away with nothing. They were wrong. I was walking away with the foundation of an empire. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I might have closed my eyes once or twice, but nothing in me surrendered to rest. The guest room had one of those ticking wall clocks Mom insisted on keeping even after the batteries started dying. It ticked fast, then slow, then stopped altogether, like it forgot its own purpose and had to remember again. Every time the sound returned, it startled me, a small mechanical gasp in a house that wasn't breathing right without her. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, feeling the weight of the lockbox at the foot of the bed. It wasn't alive, but it felt close enough to it, like it held a pulse of its own. A heartbeat built from numbers, betrayals, and signatures that didn't belong to the hand that supposedly wrote them. Jason never asked about it. Not once. He didn't knock, didn't text, didn't try to make a joke through the door, pretending he cared about how I was doing. That silence told me something. Either he didn't know I'd found it, which seemed unlikely given the way he watched everything when money was involved, or he knew and believed I wouldn't do anything with it. He always underestimated me in that way. I used to take it as an insult. Now I recognized it as an advantage. Morning came wrapped in gray light and silence. No footsteps, no breakfast sounds, no clatter of a skillet or kettle warming on the stove. Just stillness. Heavy, unmoving, like the house wasn't sure if it was allowed to wake up yet. Houses know morning in their own way. They absorb it into drywall and carpet, into the grooves of floorboards softened by years of footsteps. This one hadn't finished absorbing ours. I sat up slowly, cracking open the lockbox again, the metal cold beneath my fingertips. I laid everything out across the comforter, receipts, statements, ledger notes in Mom's handwriting. A yellowed envelope marked utilities, corners soft from age. But it was the margins that caught my attention now. Tiny scribbles beside the printed lines, dates next to deposit amounts, circles around certain numbers, short reminders. Notes like check cleared and ask Jay rebalance. Ask Jason, not me. I traced the ink with my thumb, imagining her writing it. Her sitting at the kitchen table, glasses sliding down her nose, pen tapping once, twice, before forming letters she trusted someone to understand. The realization stung more than I expected. It wasn't just that Jason had more access. It was that she believed he should. And whether she was manipulated into that belief or simply raised in a world that rewarded men for doing half the work and claiming double the credit, it burned the same way. I needed structure. Something clear, something I could hold. So I began lining up a financial timeline. Page by page. Moment by moment, I opened my laptop, the glow cutting through the dim guest room, and pulled up our family calendar. The shared one we kept once Mom started getting sick. Appointments, birthdays, grocery reminders. Notes about which weekend I could take her and which weekend Jason said he was free, though he canceled half of them. I scanned the dates one by one, matching them against the withdrawals. Every time Jason took her to the hospital, there was a cash withdrawal the same week. Sometimes the same day. 600 here. 1,200 there. The numbers formed patterns, and patterns formed stories. And stories told the truth people try to bury. Once, there was a withdrawal for $2,300. On the day she was admitted overnight for that scare in December. I remembered pacing the waiting room with a cup of vending machine coffee, staring at the back of Jason's head while he filled out hospital forms, looking like a hero. The perfect son. The reliable one. He sat with the doctor while I cried in the hallway because the air felt too thin to breathe. And the whole time, he was pulling money out in her name, but it was the $7,000 that stopped me. $7,000 taken out 2 weeks before Mom's 75th birthday. No hospital visit. No procedure. No medication change. It was like the earth on the page dropped off there. Just gone. Money doesn't disappear on its own. Someone opens a hand and lets it go. I clicked over to my email and searched for anything from the bank. There were a few old messages she had forwarded me years ago. Things she wanted a second opinion on, small questions about joint checking and transfers. Those came from her main bank, the one she and Dad shared. But this account, the First Ridge one, the one I found hidden in the lockbox, was never mentioned. Not once. I kept scrolling, eyes burning, until something caught. A scanned form labeled Account Establishment, Todd Assignment. Clean typed, official. The signature at the bottom hit me like cold water. It was slanted, uneven, an imitation of confidence. Mom's signature had always been steady, controlled even when her hand shook, and she made a little loop on the D in Denise that looked like she was drawing a tiny ribbon. I forged it once or twice for field trip slips in high school. I knew that loop like I knew my own name. The signature didn't have it. It was wrong. It was someone trying to imitate my mother's hand and failing. I leaned back, heartbeat loud in my ears. This wasn't quiet hoarding. This wasn't secret planning. This was theft. Someone had structured an account to make it look like Mom had intentionally given everything to Jason upon her death. No probate, no division, no siblings. Just him walking away with money no one else was supposed to know existed. I knew how the rest would have gone. He'd wait a few weeks. Pretend to mourn. Let the estate settle. He'd look around the family, eyes heavy with manufactured responsibility. Mom didn't have much left, he'd say. She wanted me to handle the rest. He'd sound noble when he said it. They'd believe him? They always did. Jason had a gift for lying without sweating, but now I had more than suspicion. I had proof. I had dates, signatures, dollar amounts. I had motives. By noon, I started photographing every single page, the camera shutter clicking again and again, like I was documenting a crime scene. If Jason wanted to play this like a bank heist, I'd play it like a forensic audit. I came into the kitchen as he was setting out cold cuts for a casual sandwich platter. He didn't look up at first, arranging slices of turkey in a perfect fan on a ceramic platter, like he was styling a magazine shoot. Then he glanced over, voice easy, casual, almost bored. He asked if I was hungry. I told him I wasn't. He paused long enough to study my face, pretending at concern, then asked if I was okay. I let the silence sit between us before I answered that I would be. He nodded like he believed me or like he didn't care either way, and went back to arranging pickles in a dish like they were precious jewels. I walked past him. Back to the guest room. Back to the evidence. By 2, I had typed a complete list. Every deposit. Every withdrawal. Every irregularity. And at the bottom, in bold, I wrote, Mom's signature forged August 14th, 2021. I didn't need the words to be loud. They were undeniable. I emailed an estate auditor based in Louisville. I explained the situation carefully, choosing every sentence like it mattered, because it did. I didn't say my brother. I said co-beneficiary. The word gave me distance, power, clarity. She replied within an hour. She had an opening Friday morning. She asked if I had documentation. I attached everything. When I finally looked up from the laptop, the sky outside had darkened. The house was still again, but the stillness no longer felt empty. It felt watchful. Like the walls were waiting to see which of us would break. First, I was holding my breath without realizing it, because the next step wouldn't just shift the ground. It would change the entire landscape of what came. Next, the estate office sat inside a converted craftsman style home just outside Louisville, proper ivy climbing the old brick like it had a right to reclaim it. White trim that caught the morning light, and a blue mailbox out front that looked hand-painted by someone who believed in small, deliberate beauty. It was the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it, a place that didn't need to be seen to matter. I had driven past it twice before realizing I had reached the address. Something about that felt appropriate. Not every truth reveals itself the moment you turn toward it. I parked 2 blocks down. Not because I was hiding. Because I needed the walk. The morning was cold but not bitter. Kentucky winters waited until January to show their real teeth. Today, the air felt more like a warning than a threat. I breathed it in, watching a thin curl of fog leave my mouth as I walked, my boots finding the sidewalk cracks I used to jump over as a kid. The sky was a quiet gray that made the evergreens stand out darker, like they were keeping secrets of their own. Inside the office, the air smelled like lemon wood polish and old books. Not the dusty kind, but the kind that lived on a shelf that was loved and used often. Law and memory and history pressed into pages. The sensation reminded me of the way Mom used to polish the dining room table before holidays, rubbing small circles into the wood as if gratitude itself could live in the grain. The receptionist glanced up as I approached the desk. She didn't smile too wide or try to fill the silence. She simply said my name, asking softly if I was Denise Mitchell. I nodded, my hand instinctively tightening around the envelope in my coat pocket. She told me the auditor was finishing a call and that I was next. Her voice held a practiced gentleness, not pity, just awareness. I sat in a worn leather chair by the window. The cushion held the shape of others who had waited for news that might change their lives. Sunlight cut across the rug in soft stripes, illuminating dust in the air like floating secrets, the kind of particles that lived unnoticed until the light touched them. I wondered how many families had sat here unraveling the difference between what was promised and what was taken. A door opened. My name in a calm voice. I looked up. She was exactly who I had hoped she would be. Sharp without arrogance. Composed without coldness. Glasses low on her nose. Hair pulled back, not out of vanity, but so her thoughts had room to move. Her name was Cheryl Beck. We shook hands. Her palm was dry and warm, the kind of handshake that didn't need to prove itself. She didn't compliment my coat or ask how my drive had been. She simply said, "Come in and let's talk about your mother's estate." And I followed her into an office that held 2 chairs, 1 lamp, and a monitor turned away from clients, a detail one appreciated. It meant she didn't need her power to be visible to use it. She did not waste time. She never would. She asked if she could see what I brought. I handed her the flash drive and the envelope and told her I printed everything as well in case digital files went missing. She gave the smallest smile, the kind that acknowledged strategy. Smart, she murmured, more to herself than to me. She laid out the papers quickly, statements, signatures, deposit slips, handwritten notes. She moved with the confidence of someone who could see the story inside numbers long before anyone told it. She asked when my mother passed. August of this year, I said. She asked how long before that the withdrawals began. 2 years, maybe longer, I told her. I admitted I only found the lockbox last week. She nodded like that made sense, like hidden truths often surfaced on their own timelines. Not ours. Her finger paused over the signature line of the Todd account. This account, she asked, was it ever mentioned in the will? Not once, I said. The truth tasted metallic in my mouth. She took out a laminated chart, a kind of legal family tree, and showed me how transfer on death accounts bypass probate, but not accountability. If funds originated from shared assets, they were still subject to audit. especially if there was any suspicion of elder coercion, exploitation, or forgery. She tapped the forged signature gently. "And this is?" she asked. "Not hers," I said without hesitation. I knew my mother's signature like I knew my own reflection. She began typing. The keys sounded like measured decisions. "Would I be open to an official inquiry?" "Yes," I said. She stopped typing long enough to meet my eyes. Was I prepared for how that might play out if it reached court? "He forged her signature," I replied, because that was the bone-deep truth of it. Cheryl didn't blink. "Understood," she said, and continued typing. When I left the office, I felt lighter and heavier all at once. Lighter because the truth was no longer trapped in my chest. Heavier because now it lived in documents and declarations and legal channels that would not look away. The storm wasn't coming. It had begun. Jason found out 2 days later. He showed up at Mom's house without calling, still holding the key he never returned. I was in the kitchen wrapping her porcelain birds one by one. I could feel him standing in the doorway, feel the static of him. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I didn't look up as I told him I submitted a request for audit. Of what, he asked, trying to sound confused, but his voice was too tight. I turned to face him and said, "Of the account you didn't disclose." He told me it was his account. I told him Mom deposited into it with her money. He said she wanted him to have it, that she always said he was better with numbers. I asked why he forged her signature. His eyes narrowed just for a second. That single second told the truth. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. But I did now. I told him so quietly. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. And then he left. He didn't slam the door. That almost made it worse. The next morning, Cheryl called. They had begun verification with First Ridge. The branch manager was cooperating. There were irregularities in the account designation forms, specifically around the notary stamp. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she told me, "that this was either improperly processed or intentionally falsified." A week later, we were summoned to a follow-up meeting. Jason was required to attend. I arrived early. The meeting wasn't in the first office anymore. It was in a conference room down the hall, long table, high windows, 2 framed certificates on the wall. The kind of room where truth didn't hide behind polite smiles. Jason walked in wearing a blazer he hadn't bothered to dry clean. There were circles under his eyes, the kind that come from nights spent trying to outrun consequences. We didn't greet each other. Cheryl didn't need introductions this time. She went through the paperwork line by line. Her voice held no judgment. "Just facts." She asked Jason to explain why cash was withdrawn from the account to pay for procedures already covered by Medicare. He said Mom didn't trust the system. Cheryl said reimbursement filings showed otherwise. He froze. She lifted the forged slip and said it was signed August 14th, the same week Mom was under morphine and inpatient care. Logs confirmed she wasn't in a condition to legally sign anything. Jason swallowed loudly, the sound scraping the quiet. He turned to me, eyes frantic, and said Mom told him to take care of things. That she didn't want me dealing with money. That I was grieving Dad. Cheryl interrupted gently. "That's not a legal defense." "Mr. Mitchell," he sagged into his chair, silent. I looked at him and understood something I hadn't seen clearly until that moment. He didn't know how to lose. He had built a reputation his entire life on being the fixer, the problem solver, the one who handled the hard things. But this wasn't fixable. The investigator from the County Financial Abuse Unit called me that Monday morning. Her voice was even measured, the tone of someone who had delivered this kind of news many times before. She told me she had received the report Cheryl submitted. And because the signatures on the transfer on death account did not match verified records, and because the account bypassed the estate's declared assets, a formal inquiry was required under Kentucky elder protection laws. She called it a routine case, her words calm and procedural. It didn't feel routine to me. Nothing about this felt like paperwork. It felt like excavation. I sat at Mom's old kitchen table while she spoke, the phone pressed to my ear, my other hand resting on a Sears notepad she had left behind. I hadn't moved it since the day she wrote on it. Milk, ginger ale, white thread. 3 small items scribbled in handwriting that had begun to tell as her strength faded. She wrote it the day before her final hospital stay. Before Jason brought her home that afternoon smiling, saying she just needed rest, saying she would feel better after a good night's sleep. That was the night I stayed with her late, sitting beside her on the couch while Wheel of Fortune played in the background. She didn't talk much. I remember adjusting the Afghan around her legs. Her hand trembled when she patted mine. She never said a word about a hidden account. Not one hint. And now, with everything I knew, I could see the truth she never spoke. She had tried to trust us both. A week into the legal inquiry, Cheryl sent scanned copies of the original account opening documents. I sat on the floor of the guest room to read them, back against the wall. Pages spread around me like a map of territory I used to believe was familiar. On page 2 was something I had not seen before. A handwritten note by the bank manager. Initiate by son, requested discretion due to emotional family concerns. It was dated more than a year before she died. The manager's name was signed at the bottom, Rob Hessel. I asked Cheryl if we could meet him. She made a call. She didn't promise an outcome. She promised an effort. And sometimes that is all a person needs. We met him at First Ridge Bank on a Thursday morning. Frost rimmed the windows, fine and white. Delicate like lace patterns pressed against the glass, Mr. Hessel sat with us in a small glass-walled office. He looked to be in his 50s, clean-shaven, a man who seemed more comfortable approving home loans than explaining why an elderly woman's recorded wishes had been ignored. He opened a folder slowly, as if bracing himself, and nudged it across the desk toward me. He said these documents were added to the file shortly after the account was created, and that it was unusual. He paused, searching for words, then said that my mother had seemed concerned. I opened the folder. A letter lay inside, typed, brief, clear. This account is not to be used without my consent. I have authorized my son to assist me, but not to access or claim these funds after my passing without proper estate review. If anything changes, I will issue new instructions. Charlene Mitchell, the date stamped beneath her name, was 6 months before she began to decline. I stared at the letter for a long time. I asked why it wasn't flagged when the transfer on death designation was activated. Hessel shifted in his seat and said there was no power of attorney document submitted. And when my mother passed, Jason presented updated beneficiary forms and the bank assumed it was valid. I asked if they assumed it was valid even though the letter was in the file. He didn't answer. Cheryl filled the silence and said there would be consequences for the institution. But our priority now was recovering misallocated funds. Misallocated, that was the word she used. Not stolen. Not taken. Not betrayed. Just misallocated. I felt something in me tighten and release at the same time, like a thread snapping and freeing whatever it had held in place. Jason wasn't arrested. Cases like this rarely unfold that way. But the audit findings were clear: unauthorized withdrawals, forged designation forms, elder influence, and financial matters. The estate attorney filed an amendment with the probate court. Jason was stripped of his executor privileges. His authority evaporated on paper, even if he would never admit it in his mind. He didn't call. He didn't email. But one day I found a sticky note pushed under the front door. No envelope, just a scrap of paper with his handwriting, uneven and hurried. I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted to protect what was left. I closed my fist around it and felt the paper crumple. Protection, I thought. That's what they always say. That they were protecting someone, protecting something. But he wasn't protecting her. He was protecting his control. A week later, I returned to the bank alone. The inquiry had run its course. There was only one thing left to do. Close the account. The funds had been frozen and reallocated through probate. Half would go to me. Half would sit in legal escrow while restitution was decided. But I wasn't there for the money anymore. I brought a different letter with me. Not the forged form. Not a bank document. A real letter. My mother's, the one she wrote the night after Dad passed. She left it in my nightstand, sealed in an envelope with her handwriting on the front. For when you start to feel invisible. I never opened it. Not until the night after the audit ended. The ink had faded, but the words had not. I see you. I always have. You don't need to fight to be heard. Just be still long enough. And they'll hear everything you never said. It wasn't legal instruction. It wasn't strategy. It was a map back to myself. I handed the closure form to the teller. She looked confused. She asked if I was sure, reminding me that I was authorized now, that the funds belonged to me. I told her it didn't anymore. It served its purpose. She typed the final sequence of numbers, printed the closure slip, and stamped it. I folded the paper in half, then again, and tucked it into my coat pocket. At home, I packed the last of Mom's sweaters. The ones that still smelled faintly like lavender and drier sheets. The air in the house felt warmer. Not lighter. Not exactly peaceful. But still. Stillness like a truth settling into the floorboards. Jason tried to call once. I let it ring. I knew what he wanted. Not an apology. A rewrite. A version of the story where he was misunderstood, where I was overreacting. Where intentions weighed more than actions. But this wasn't a story about reconciliation. It was about correction. And I intended to finish it. I visited her grave alone. No service, no flowers, no family. Just me and the wind picking through dry November leaves, moving as if it had somewhere to be. The cemetery sat on a slope overlooking Shelbyville. The land rolling out in muted browns and grays, the trees bare and reaching into a sky that was flat and silver. It was the kind of afternoon where you could hear every creak of your bones. Where the cold got into your joints and felt like it was rearranging you from the inside out. I parked near the entrance. Not because I wanted a quicker exit, but because I needed the walk. Gravel crunched under my boots as I moved uphill, past rows of stones carved with fragments of legacies. Beloved wife. Devoted father. Gone too soon. The grass was frost-tipped, brittle beneath each step. I kept one hand buried in my coat pocket, fingers curled around two folded pieces of paper. One was a letter. The other a photocopy of the forged slip, torn down the center from the day I found enough strength to tear it. The edges were wavy from the number of times I had unfolded and folded it again. Like a habit I didn't know how to break, when I reached her headstone, I stopped. Charlene N. Mitchell, beloved mother. Devoted wife. 1949 to 2023. I stared at the lettering, the grooves cut into the stone as if permanence could be carved into the world. I waited like I was listening for something. For a sign. For her voice. But graves don't talk. They just hold secrets. They hold them until someone has the courage to stop pretending they aren't there. I didn't speak at first. I just stood with my hands in my pockets, boots scuffing the frostbitten grass. The silence wasn't empty. It was exact. It was the space where everything we never said lived. After a moment, I knelt, laying the torn photocopy at the base of the stone. The wind pressed against my back like a hand, not pushing, not guiding, just making sure I didn't fall backward. I said softly that I knew she never meant for it to end this way. The words came out uneven, like they were stepping over old memories to reach daylight. I told her she trusted us both, that she believed we would carry each other when she was gone, not fracture into a courtroom, not sit across tables stacked with evidence and signatures and questions about loyalty. I looked at her name again, remembering the way she used to write it on holiday gift tags, small loops of ink curling like ribbon. I told her I didn't protect the money. I protected her memory. And I meant it. I would rather lose every dollar than let someone rewrite the truth of who she was. I stood slowly, brushing off my knees. The wind shifted, colder now, a warning or a blessing, I couldn't tell which. Down the slope, the parking lot was almost empty, except for a single black sedan parked crooked near the curb. Jason, he didn't get out. He just watched. Through the windshield, I saw the silhouette of his shoulders, no longer squared, no longer lifted like a man who believed the world belonged to him. His hand lifted once, just slightly, half a wave or half a surrender. I didn't wave back. I turned and walked away. The final audit had concluded 3 days before. The probate court approved the amendment. My portion of the funds was released $21,158.92 after fees and restitution adjustments. A number that didn't represent peace, only arithmetic. I transferred it to a local education fund for adult women re-entering the workforce. Women who had been talked over, talked around, or told they were too emotional, too fragile, too unprepared for the world. Women like me dot the other half of the funds? Frozen. Pending Jason's compliance with the settlement terms. He hadn't spoken to me since the last deposition. Not directly. But Cheryl told me with the same professional restraint she carried into every conversation that he had requested a modification to allow voluntary partial repayment instead of formal restitution. I declined. Because some debts aren't financial. They're moral. And morals can't be reduced to monthly installments. Back home, I opened a drawer in the kitchen and took out Mom's recipe binder. The one with the stained index cards and the careful instructions written in her voice. I slid her real letter, the one about invisibility, between the pages. Right between 4th of July potato salad and the peanut butter pie she made every Christmas. Because the truth belongs in ordinary places. Not hidden in bank files. Not buried under forged signatures. But here, tucked into flour-coated pages. In a house that knew her better than any document ever could. That night, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Jason. I didn't think he'd really go through with it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had gone through with it, quietly, completely, not to punish him, but to restore her. My mother built the account to protect us. My brother hid it to protect himself. I closed it to protect her memory. I stood in the quiet kitchen, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle, not like a burden, but like something finally in the right place. I thought about the women whose lives might shift because of that education fund, about the possibility that what was meant to divide could be used to rebuild. I thought about all the times I let myself be small, and all the ways I would not do that again. I turned off the kitchen light. The house held its stillness, not hollow but whole. For the first time since this began, I truly believed that she would have been proud. Want more stories like this? Like, subscribe, and let's talk in the comments.